and welcome to Feeling Therapeutic, a show about complicated feelings. Each week, I bring in therapists to discuss a complicated feeling of their choice, one that clients typically struggle to apply to their own lives. My name is Dr. Jonathan Ram, and with me this week is Saakshi Agarwal. Saakshi, same as me, is on the path to be completing her Master's of Arts in Counselling Psychology, a degree at Yorkville University. Before coming to Canada in 2022, she worked in the mental health landscape in India for 5 years. She has worked as a sexuality educator, a school and careers counselor, and a couples therapist. Sakshi's therapeutic interests lie in mindfulness based psychotherapy and CBT. She is also an avid reader and puzzle lover. Sakshi, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
It's absolutely my pleasure. It's an honor to have a fellow student such as myself. I feel like we both know the struggle of doing all of the work and doing
Yeah.
all these different projects at the same time. And I feel like that's actually going to feed into what we're talking about today for sure.
Definitely, definitely. Really looking forward to this.
Okay. Well then I won't tease the topic of the episode too much, although it is in the title, so people already know. What feeling are we talking about today?
I thought it would be fun to talk about inadequacy because it's such a natural feeling that all of us experience at some point in our lives.
For sure, yeah. Is there an importance to this topic that you feel we should cover and we should explore a bit?
Uh, I think just like you mentioned, as if, for example, as students, we juggle so many things. We're trying out so many new things. And that is when this can come up, or any other milestone in life, professionally, personally. Let's say when someone is entering into a new relationship or becoming a parent. This is such a natural feeling that just keeps coming up. And I thought it would be really interesting to just dig deep into it to understand it a little better.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, honestly. Feeling inadequate is something that comes up both explicitly, I find, in therapy, but also it ends up showing up um, behind many emotions that our clients readily express. So they'll say that they're feeling sad, they're feeling angry, they're upset, but why they're feeling angry, sad, upset usually can be triggered by something to do with inadequacy and comparing themselves. But before we go too far into it, I'm going to take a moment for the uninitiated people who maybe don't have like a very specific definition of what the term means. And I'm going to borrow a definition from Cambridge Dictionary. Inadequate is defined as not good enough or too low in quality, too small an amount, or not confident enough to deal with a situation. And the root of this word, according to the online etymology dictionary, comes from the Latin adequatus, which is translated to equalize. In this case, it's equalize to what is required. I think that's really interesting, what is required, because it's not just a matter of not feeling enough. It's not feeling enough to a goal, to a ideal, to something where you have to be measured up against. And what you are measured up against can vary from person to person. So I'm wondering, how does that feed into what feeling inadequate means to you?
I think what you brought about is really interesting because it is definitely we all have that ideal version or that ideal that we want to measure up against, and working towards a goal that we have for ourselves is healthy. It's definitely good. And it takes me back to a workshop that I was attending on which spoke about different traits that we have. And the speaker basically told me that all every single trait in itself is not negative or positive because every trait serves a purpose. So, this feeling inadequate can come from our need for self improvement.
Mm-hmm.
But self improvement in itself is it's a great trait to have because we're constantly wanting to be better as individuals, working towards a goal. it can become a problem, or it can start affecting us in some way when compared to self improvement. Our sense of self acceptance or self compassion is a little lower. So if
Hmm.
both of them are equal, we these feelings might come up, but we can deal with it and we can still keep moving forward. But if, let's say, that self improvement is high and with a very low self compassion for, or just a sense of kindness towards ourselves, then I feel like the ideal that we have set for ourselves, while might not seem close enough or might not seem reachable.
So if I understand what you're saying is that feeling inadequate kind of points you in a direction of what it is you care about, and in the specifically what aspect of yourself you care to improve upon and invest in. And it really only becomes a negative experience when people don't have the compassion to say, I'm working at it, I'm doing my best, but even if I'm not there yet, I know I'm working towards it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And there's this theory that I really like in psychology about, it's from Alfred Adler, who discussed inadequacy in terms of inferiority,
Sure.
where he said that in itself, it can be a healthy feeling because it can serve as a motivator for the goals that we have for ourselves. So just by itself, it can really serve a purpose. But again, as you said, if it's coming from a place of, yeah, I think it's still a journey that I have to take and I'm doing the work. If it's coming from that place of mind, then it can really serve a great purpose. But if we start looking at our setbacks or some of the errors that we make as mistakes, so I think then it can really affect how we perceive a lot of things.
And to me that it very much falls in line, um in the CBT idea of reframing, where if you reframe inadequacy and feeling inadequate, it is feeling driven to meet a standard that you have set. And
Right.
I think for a lot of people, they might say, "Oh, I didn't set the standard. The standard was set for me." But even if that standard might originate from like an external source, you are still the one who is accepting that that standard is true.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I feel like a way like to explain that is is the idea of someone coming up to you and saying, "Okay, I need you to give me a 5 foot vertical leap," and you're thinking, Not only can I not do that, I'm pretty sure nobody does that."
Right.
Would you start to feel inadequate? Probably not, because that standard, even though it came externally and now it exists in the world because someone said it to you, it doesn't sound like something you would accept. And there are so many inadequacies that are based on goals that others set for us that we then internalize and we bring into ourselves. And if you reframe it, you can say, okay, I'm moving towards that. Even if you accept it, I'm moving towards it. But I wonder, is there room for people in therapy to change what that standard is?
Hmm. I think I think definitely it takes time for sure,
Hmm.
but I think that's definitely a possibility because again, I when I talk to anyone in therapy or just in general, I come from the place of just wishing people were more kinder and compassionate towards themselves.
For sure.
And that that doesn't mean that they're not working towards a goal. Definitely, I like to keep improving and developing new skills, but with just a little bit of kinder lens. And that is something that I bring forward. And sometimes that looks like just understanding when something looks a little feasible
Mhm.
and when it doesn't. So,
Right.
yeah. And that doesn't say anything about anyone's abilities. It's just something that we're looking at and we're just asking ourselves how realistic it is.
How does one compassionately set these standards, do you think? What does that look like?
I think I think the first step is just becoming a little more aware. What it means is what it looks for me is just giving that feeling, or just seeing where that feelings come from, giving them a chance to talk about their motivations, where is this coming from, understanding why this is so important for them.
Mhm.
Because, yeah, I think that's really important before we start to work towards changing the standard and making it more realistic. As much as we want to, it's important to hear uh, what that motivation is or where that is coming from.
I think that makes a lot of sense because then if you talk about, okay, how can we make a standard more realistic, you can honor the motivation and that'll make the new standard, the new goal, the new ideal seem more acceptable.
Yeah.
Is there, I wonder also if talking to the client about what it would mean if someone else didn't meet that standard. So often I find that the rules that our clients apply to themselves, they refuse to apply to anyone else. So it creates a world where everyone, for example, I don't talk about my feelings to my friends because I don't want to burden them with that. But if they want to talk to me about their feelings, I'm totally game. I'm there for them. I want to hear the whole story. Vent if you want to. I'll give advice if you want to, because the standard that they've set is not universal. It's only for them. And understanding where that discrepancy is and why it happens, I feel
Yeah.
like is a good way to compassionately look at your own ideals and your goals.
Yeah, I think what you said is so relevant here, because as I think you very rightly said that a lot of times people can be a little more critical, a little more harder on themselves than they are towards other people. And I think that's what my experience has been in therapy in India, and just going for therapy myself, where I realized that, it's so important to be kind towards ourselves, and just, so something that was told to me, and I try to tell this to people as well, that it's about how you talk to yourself. Just talking to yourself how you would talk to, let's say, a friend or a little child. I think that is an important tone to use.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that how you talk to yourself is also a big part of how you frame feeling inadequate. Feeling inadequate is, it kind of implies that you are um you are looking at the sliver of yourself that you feel does not measure up, which
Yeah.
means that you kind of have to exclude the parts of yourself that you like and that you feel like are uh, 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 getting ahead. You are getting ahead in, that you are strong in, because it is very much a focusing on the negative. It's focusing on, well, okay, all that stuff is taken care of. I'm not going to worry about that. I already know how to, you know, I can already ski down the biggest hill. I can already uh I can't think of more athletic things, which I think says a lot about me, but they feel that they're adequate in other things, so they don't think about it. It doesn't come to mind. It's that
Mm.
bias of thinking about the things that you don't think are already there, are still needing to improve upon.
Yeah, definitely. I think, as you said, that, focusing, again, it might come from the need for self improvement,
Sure.
that probably so focused on wanting to improve that that's where compassion comes in, where we're acknowledging, we're seeing a whole picture rather than having a very specific view and focusing on one thing. And I think that's where compassion comes in as well. It doesn't mean just blind optimism or blind positivity, or giving yourself pep talk that, okay, I can do it. It's about just developing a kind of view of oneself, of ourselves. And that also means giving voice to a lot of uncomfortable feelings that come up, for example,
Sure.
in our, which can feel so uncomfortable when we're feeling it in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely agree with that. And I think feeling inadequate is such a common theme in our courses. We have these discussion questions, and so often these discussion topics will come up where people say, "Oh yeah, I don't feel like I can do this at all. I don't feel like I can be a therapist
Yeah.
because I have problems. And if I have problems, then how am I supposed to sit across from someone straight faced and tell them it'll be okay, you'll figure it out. And I feel like such a misunderstanding of the realism of being in therapy and practicing therapy is that you're supposed to be pessimistic, that realism is the same as pessimism, but realistic optimism in therapy is saying like, do not ignore the positives in your life, because that is part of the math of who you are, and it
Right.
matters for what you're trying to do here, even for the things that you feel inadequate about. And that applies as much to the therapist as I think it does to the client.
Yeah, I think what you said is so relevant because when I initially started therapy, that's what I assumed therapy would look like, where I'm supposed to be this perfect person who's not making mistakes. But I think before we even start providing therapy to people, it's just about acknowledging our own areas of growth and improvement. And I think and when therapists acknowledge this and just feel more at home with these feelings of inadequacy at times, I feel like that's what makes not just therapists but anyone just better at what they do,
Yeah.
because it helps them connect with people in a more human way. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to what you said about how like no emotion is negative, in that it, what a positive tool to have, to know your own inadequacies and feelings of inadequacy, and to say, wow, like this is part of the human experience. How do I deal with this? How would I want someone to deal with this in a healthy way? How would I want it to motivate them? I think that one of the biggest drivers I have found in my own practice is getting excited about not knowing things.
Mhm.
It has been one of the drivers for me to say, okay, I guess I'm gonna go read about this, because I don't even know what we're talking about right now. And I'm always very upfront about that. It's like, I don't know anything about that. And sometimes it's been about the therapy, and sometimes it's been about the topic that we're talking about. I think I've yesterday I read like a whole explainer on why a truck is a better investment than a car in like what circumstances. And that's been really interesting. And I had no idea that there were criteria about that. And I know that now because during a conversation with a client, I felt completely inadequate to talk about this truck problem. I could only take it from a therapeutic angle. I couldn't talk about it from the practicalities. So I like that it is feeling inadequate, though it has a negative connotation, really does seem to have a intrinsic positive property depending on if you can reframe it and look at it differently.
Definitely. I really liked how you mentioned about what you do with that feeling inadequate. And I think that's really relevant because it has worked for me as well. As we discussed, that inadequacy is such a common feeling. I moved to Canada recently. That really brought up this feeling where there was so many different thousands of different types of jobs that I've never even heard of.
Sure.
Or the ones that existed in India do not exist here at all.
Right.
So I think it's such a common feeling to have it. And looking at it from the perspective that you just mentioned, okay, I think this is what is coming up for me. So let me do something about it. That is such a great way. I feel like that is such a wonderful use of this feeling.
No, my experience in the reverse direction of what you just described is in my time that I spent in India. I took these little carts called tuk-tuks everywhere, and nothing makes a foreigner feel more inadequate than sitting in Bangalore traffic in like an open air cart, because because everyone seems fine. Everyone is like vibing and they're having a great time. And you're just sitting there like, I'm in danger. I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. And, I took it as an experience where I could say, hey, maybe I'm about to get really comfortable with traffic that is chaotic, because in Canada it seems so orderly in comparison. And
Yeah.
I've had fear on Canadian roads before. I'm not always the most confident driver. And then I remember coming back here and driving around and being like, "Oh, this is fine." There is no, I have nothing to be worried about because in comparison, it's so simple to drive the streets of Canada.
Yeah.
I felt inadequate, but it didn't end up being a negative experience, which really surprised me because at the time I was sure like I would say, oh wow, I can't handle bad traffic, but now I totally can.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is so relevant. It brings me back to something. My first job that I had in Canada,
Mhm.
it was in a childcare center, and I was not used to working with children. I was just helping out. I was not used to working with someone so young, and there was definitely a learning curve. Lots of feelings of inadequacy. I was just shadowing, and I think for me, it definitely felt uncomfortable because I was so used to knowing everything or doing what is necessary. That, I didn't feel this feeling for a very long time. It's been 4, 5 years since I felt it with such an intensity. And then I told myself that definitely there are people who are doing this job better than I am here. But just telling myself that then I'll do what is there in my control. So that is showing up on time, making sure that if the shift starts at 8, I'm there at 7:45 and I'm helping out, I'm or constantly taking initiatives, just the things that are in my hands. And that made it such a great learning experience for me. I built such great relations, not just with the children, but even with the educators over there. So I feel like it's just about looking at that feeling and just listening to it, just giving yourself that permission to feel inadequate, I guess.
And I think that seems to be the takeaway from this episode is that feeling inadequate can be, and this might be the word of the day, sublimated. You can sublimate a feeling that is traditionally negative, and as a healthy coping mechanism, turn it into something that fuels you, that drives you, that makes you happier in a role that you're not necessarily naturally comfortable with or experienced with. And it sounds like in your story you did that beautifully, and it was basically do that or just give up. Those were really your options there.
Mm. Exactly, exactly. And I think, yeah, I think just looking at this feeling from this perspective really helped me in my journey in Canada, at least. So, yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, I thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you so much for recording this episode with me. Feeling inadequate is a very big topic, and I'm glad that we could even just scratch the surface of it. The For our listeners out there, this feels like the right time to tell you that the show is brought to you by Rolls and Associates. Rolls and Associates provides in-person and virtual therapy in various locations across the province of Ontario. Our team specializes in treating mental health disorders, addictions, relationship issues among all age groups in the entirety of a lifespan, individuals, couples, families, and children. So, if you or someone you care about would benefit from psychotherapy, would benefit from talking about inadequacy, please visit rollspsychotherapy.com. That's ROLES psychotherapy.com. Sakshi, is there anything that you want to plug here at the end of our episode?
Definitely. I think because didn't just talk about inadequacy, I think we spoke about compassion as well, and how important it is to be compassionate. I I would like to just recommend a couple of things that I really like. So there's this psychologist, Dr. Nicole LaPera.
Sure.
She she's also known as the holistic psychologist. She's published a couple of books. She's so active on Instagram, and to just check her posts. I really enjoy this YouTube channel called as Cinema Therapy because it brings together two of the things that I love the most: therapy, counseling, and movies, especially animated movies. And I feel like they look at it from such an interesting perspective, talking about not just these feelings, but anything that we struggle with, and using movies as a tool to do that. And I think that would be really interesting.
That's awesome. I really look forward to checking those things out. All right. That's another episode done. And honestly, that feels pretty good. Thanks for
That-
listening.
Thank you.